Hello, everyone viewing from home. Welcome to a Narrative Trailblazer. Wait, wow, that's a way to start something. Welcome to Narrative Trailblazers, the conversation. And I'm a real world programmer here at Real World. My name is Aisha. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm really excited because this is an endeavor I've been trying to get off the ground for maybe since around 2021 or so, and now it's 2024. So I'm really excited to have these two filmmakers talk about their experiences getting their first narrative feature off the ground, looking at where we started and kind of where we are now, so we can look at these experiences as a way to continue forward in an empowered way, as it is Black History Month, and there's progress to be made, even though we've come a long way. So I'm now going to take a moment to introduce the filmmakers. So we have Tyrone Tommy and we have Sutherland. So if you can kind of tell our audience where you're beaming in from and why we know that you're such great filmmakers, recent titles you've worked on, and I guess maybe what calls you to even working in cinema, those kinds of things. So Suds, I'll have you go first.
Thank you very much, Aisha, for inviting me. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a writer and director. Work here in Toronto. I work in Toronto mostly, but now there are no borders anymore, so I'm all over the place. I'm coming at you live and direct from Vancouver, where I'm working on a show called Alert Missing Persons Unit. So I'm out here in Vancouver for the next month, and I'm a narrative filmmaker. So I work in both documentary and drama. Do a little comedy as well. But I have done features as well as series. My last sort of big thing that I did was called BLK: An Origin Story, which is a docu-series on Black Canadian history. And that aired on Global and the History Channel. And that just told the stories of how Black folks came to the country and how they navigated the systems from back in the 1700s up until today. That's me.
Coolio. Also to note, Sutherland's debut feature, narrative feature, Love, Sex, and Eating the Bones, 2001, I think. Yes, I should know that as the programmer.
2004. We released it in March 2004.
IMDb says something very different.
I know, 2003. They say it was at the Toronto Film Festival where it won Best First Feature in 2003, and then we released it in March 2004.
Got it. And so thank you so much for that. I'm really excited to dive into your experiences with making your first feature, but I'm going to segue into Mr. Tyrone Tommy. If you can tell us a bit about yourself, where you're based, and what you do.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Aisha. Thanks for having us, Real World. My name is Tyrone Tommy. I'm a writer director here in Toronto. I'm beaming from Toronto right now, Hyde Park area more specifically. I've been a filmmaker now for about 10 years. Started with a program called POV back in 2012. It's a program that's still going to this day and has been a great influence on my career. And my first feature came out, and mine was 2021, so 10 years after your Sudz. And Learn to Swim, it was what it was called. It debuted at TIFF as well, and has gone on to do wonderful things. It was part of TIFF Top 10 and was released here in Canada with Mongrel, and in the United States was Ava DuVernay's distribution company, Array. So it's on Netflix in US and UK and Australia. And recently I also worked on a show called Revenge of the Best Black Friend with a brilliant woman, Amanda Paris. I'm sure if you haven't heard of her, please look her up because she's very brilliant. She has a show on CBC right now called For the Culture, which is also brilliant. I'm going to use the opportunity to plug Friends in this moment. This is really cool to set up. Real World has been the first festival I played in the city was Real World, and that was in 2014 with a short film that I had. And I worked in a movie theater when I was about 13. That was my first job ever. And so being able to return back to that movie theater with Real World, playing one of my first shorts, was such a uh, a full circle moment. So it's very, very cool coming and doing these things and continuing to work with the festival.
Oh, sick. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, wow. One of the things I appreciate about Tanya Williams, the founder, is that she like really wants filmmakers and even the programmers as well to start at Real World and go off and do great things. So it's really, I'm sure she's watching now, so I'm sure she'd be really warmed to hear that. So to segue into the conversation, I wanted to kind of talk about both your respective experiences getting your first narrative feature film off the ground. So for you, Sudz, like late noughts into early 2000s, what that was like. So surrounding questions, what was the development process like? And did you feel you had the support you needed? And if not, where did you find it? So I just want to know the inception to like getting to the first day of principal photography for both of you. So Sudz, if you would go first.
It was I work with Jennifer Holness, who's my creative partner. Full disclosure, my wife, mother of our 3 daughters. So we run a production company called Hungry Eyes Media. It started off as Hungry Eyes Film Food, but we were confused with a catering company, so we decided to segue into Hungry Eyes Media. And so it was a long and difficult process to get Love, Sex, and Eating Bones off the ground. People, had, at that point, they were like, hey, what if you change like one or both of your leads to white? And we were like, what? This is a comedy about 2 Black people getting together. It's a romantic comedy with an actual impediment. So we wanted to, make something that was kind of like, about Toronto Black people falling in love. And the idea that people would say it would be easier to finance this if we change one or both of the protagonists' races was incredibly insulting to us. And that was the end of our discussion, because we'd see like, sorry, my daughter's ex-boyfriend has just come to the house. So I'm just trying to manage this stuff. And I just
family man and filmmaker, everyone.
It's like literally, I'm like telling you, it's just ridiculous. I'm very, very, yeah. So I'm a little distracted. So anyways, so the whole thing of it was Jen and I were like trying to get this thing off the ground, and we're trying to go through telefilm. And this was a budgeted film of like $2.5 million back in 2000 money. So it was difficult. And we got turned down, went again, got turned down, from telefilm. And then we basically had to enlist like all of our sort of godfathers in the industry and godmothers in the industry to like just write letters on our behalf, right? And basically I had to storyboard this whole film out. I had to go and pitch this thing like several times, and basically I had to shoot the film before, it was like all laid out, and people still like didn't really get it, because it was an edgy romantic comedy. It was an R-rated romantic comedy where there hadn't been one that come out yet. One had just come out just before we kind of went to camera, 40-Year-Old Virgin, and that was a sort of the first R-rated comedy. And so we were trying to do something that was R-rated, that was a sex comedy, and so people hadn't really seen it, and they were like, kind of like, "Are you sure?" And so that was like sort of in its infancy. So, but we were lucky because that third try, we just like basically said, "Look, you got to fund us. You have to finance this film." So we got money from the Ontario Creates, which owned DC, but we had like had lots of different pots of money. City TV was one of the early people who had faith in us. So we just sort of piled all that sort of like the private monies first, like TMN, like they put money in. All these companies put money in, and Telefilm was like the last funder. So it's basically we had all the financing except for Telefilm, and then they came in at the end, and then we got the green light, and then we did it, and the rest is history. But it was like a situation where people were saying, like distributors, everybody was saying like, you know what, we could sell this if you got like a white male lead, and it was like, that was the whole thing that was going to get my movie, get our movie sold. And so we was like, no, we couldn't do that. Like Jen and I were like, that's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. If that's the case, forget it. I don't want to do this movie. And that was really the choice that was presented to us. and that was like gonna get this movie made or whatever. But we didn't want to betray our beliefs, and that wasn't what we wrote. And so we were like, nah, 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 nah. So that was the getting there. This is an abbreviated version because this is like basically about 5 years you're talking about. Because I had to like
okay.
I had to like do like a lot of short films up to that point, and so I got really good. I wasn't getting any like TV work or anything like that. I was writing for TV, but I was doing like, I was a writer's assistant. So I started off writer's assistant, and then just like incrementally also like writing little short like pieces like Sesame Park, the Canadian Sesame Street. So I write little 2-3 minute skits. I don't remember that, but that was like, we had a Canadian Sesame Street. It was called Sesame Park, and so little like.
Didn't know that. Tyrone, did you know that?
It's a little bit early. It's a little bit early for me.
It's like, yeah, it's like this is what we, I mean, it was like in the early 2000s. Like it would be on television. You wouldn't be watching it. I don't know. Maybe you'd be watching the regular Sesame Street. Who knows?
That's so cool. Yeah. Anyway, back to you. But so it sounds like in many ways, like you kind of had to lobby, but it was predominantly a racial issue in the sense that Black faces were not considered bankable. So like that, if we can sell this movie, if you had a white lead and you wanted to be true to yourselves and authentic. But it did sound like you managed to, so it sounds like persistence and perseverance were really on your side in that regard. I'd like to kind of pivot to Thyrone. I'm curious because like, I feel like when maybe you were getting your movie off the ground, people wouldn't be so loud about saying, no, we can't have a Black lead on screen. Like that's a quiet thing. Like, for example, everyone knows the Star Wars poster where John Boyega, like the international one, John Boyega is like really small in the corner even though he's like one of the leads of the movie. So it sounds like Sudz, you had a time where they were just very overt with it. And so Thyrone, I'm wondering what your experience was and like if race was even a factor, and maybe we've kind of grown as a society. So what your experience was like getting your feature off the ground.
I mean, I guess race directly wasn't as much of a factor as opposed to as in the sense of that someone saying to us that there was an issue with having a Black lead and an Afro-Latina lead in our film. I think it sort of shows up in other ways. One of thank God for Thomas Anthony Olajide, who plays the lead in my film. I'd worked with him on a previous film, Mariner, and we had he was our lead from day one. But finding Emma Ferreira, who ended up playing Selma, was a very large task. We had written this very specific role for an Afro-Latina woman, and finding not just even for her, even for the older version of her character Sal, it was quite difficult. We had casting after casting. We started casting, looking at theater actors in New York at one point, writing letters to people, just trying to find. Because the network of people from diverse backgrounds, I think sometimes we think there's a lot of people that are in the industry that are diverse, but it's really, anytime you write a casting for someone of a minority background, you get a very small pool of people that show up, and so that was a challenge as far as that goes. And I think on the back end, you get a little bit of that when you try to go to distribution. There's always sort of, no one will say it up at the front, but when you go to do sales later on, and you're looking at different regions. You've seen other films playing, and you're like, oh, our film is in that vibe. I feel we could play in this country, play in that country, and all of a sudden it's like, the film doesn't really play there, and you're like, well, why doesn't it? It has music, it has romance, it's sexy. What's stopping it? And the underlying thing is usually that Black films don't sell in certain regions, right? Or don't do as well as one would want in certain regions. And whether or not that actually exists, from a money standpoint, from an actual number standpoint, is arguable, right? But that's usually the excuse that will come up. But as far as making the film goes, it's sort of, Telephone was the first for us to come in, but that's because we also had that micro budget program that had just been started. So, it was, you got what 20 cents it was, and 50 people get to make a film, and you just kind of see what sticks. It's like, which one of these will make it. And I remember going to the first telefilm micro budget meeting with all the filmmakers that were there. And it's very overwhelming, because you're everyone has this very small pocket of money. I believe at the time it was 125,000 or 150,000, I think, was what they were giving. And I think it's been raised now, but I think at the time that was about it. So you're thinking about, okay, there's no such thing as a feature film that costs that much money. So where's the rest of it coming from? And I feel like everyone had the same sort of thought going through their head. And you're
Mm-hmm.
hoping everyone figures it out, but you also know from a practical standpoint that it's a tall task for all of us. And
Right.
luckily, and in the end, the abbreviated version is, in the end, Toronto Arts Council contributed to the movie, CBC contributed to the movie, but it was also a film that was 10 days away from going to camera when COVID happened. So we have we're a COVID movie, so to speak, as far as the film was shot in December of 2020 and March of 2021. So I feel like the first feature journey that I took, as far as like producing and making the movie,
Mm-hmm.
a bit distinct from, I think, the way it would normally have been had the plague not taken place across across the globe at that
The
exact
Rona.
time. Yeah. So
So then it sounds like, okay, so then to kind of draw a parallel between the two of you, it sounds like in some way, like in many ways, since you faced overt racism and just had to kind of keep moving in the face of it. Um, even would you say that statement is hyperbolic, or would you agree? I'm curious about your thoughts on the experience, or if you maybe looking back are like, maybe it wasn't so bad, or when you were in the experience, you weren't feeling like you were experiencing discrimination, or am I just laying this on your experience? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
No, I mean, like, it's like overt racism, period. Like, I mean,
Okay.
it's like
Okay,
I've
cool.
been
Well,
experiencing overt racism since day one in this country. So it's not like it's not. It's like
mhm,
the problem is we just kind of get used to it. But the thing is that,
mhm,
yeah, like the conversations that you're having on a daily, on a regular, even as Tyrone was saying, in terms of distributors, like, well, it's not going to sell in these territories. Yeah, yeah. Well, the films in the past haven't sold because you haven't advertised and you haven't supported it
right.
with advertising, and you haven't done this, you haven't done this. But it's like, for the distributors, they have their sort of, beliefs, and then I call this to my girls, I say, well, it's traditional thinking. So if you don't want to call it racism, it's traditional thinking. And so
Mhm,
they think, and they have a ceiling, and they look at us, and it's like a teacher looking at a black child. It's like, well, you're going to be limited in this way. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. So that people project all their kind of like stuff onto you, and that's fine. Let them do that.
mhm,
But I always try to defy those notions and say, F you, this is what we're going to do. So as a filmmaker, you have to have that mindset that you're going to defy their expectations. So whatever overt or subtle racism you're going to face, you're always facing racism as you're going into the room.
mhm,
So and we get it. That's why we have to support each other's film. That's why we have to shout it out. That's why you have to go on IMDb and rate films highly, because you got bots and you got a whole bunch of people dedicated to rating your films lower. And if you notice, all these films are rated low on IMDb and Amazon and all that kind of stuff,
mhm.
because of that racism. But that's like that shouldn't get in our way. We have to continue to make our voices heard, because we're doing
Right.
it not just for the ancestors, but for the people who are coming after us. So yeah, sure. I had faced, and Jen and I had faced, just like it was like a wall. Like I couldn't even get into the DGC because
Mhm,
there you had to have 3 letters from experienced people who were in the DGC. It's hard. I got into the DGC as a director, not as a PA. Not as I was trying to break in as a PA. I was trying to break in locations or whatever, and it was hard. It was very, very hard. It was like an uphill, like it was like a wall, a brick wall, right? So there was a lot of
mhm,
barriers to entry back in the day, and there still are, obviously. There's no programs. There were no programs like there are now. Like there were no
Mhm.
there were none, you know. So we had to kind of make
Yeah.
this stuff up as we went along. And Jen and I just had to make it up and just try to figure out a way to do it. And so we did, but it's like now there's a little bit more assistance and they're a bit more like people understand out, especially post George Floyd, that there is like there you know, these sets are not diverse. I'm here in Vancouver. The sets are not diverse. So that's like it, you know. You know, somebody put their hand on me yesterday, just like, "Where's my coffee?" And I'm like, and I swear to God, and
No!
she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," because she thought from the back I looked like her assistant or whatever. And it was so funny because she's like just so apologetic afterwards. And I'm like, okay, I got you. You know, at this point, I'm a part of this directors group, and they're like, we always like, you know, have a like, when does this happen? Like on which day of prep this happens, and this happens to every one of us. So it's not like it's gone anywhere. It's just sort of submerged a little bit.
Well, I just started sweating, but thank you for sharing. And
That's
I
life.
guess it is life, but the thing is, like, and the thing is, you said something really lovely about looking to the future and like also noting the programs. And like, I know that Tyrone, we started with POV, and I like kind of mentee or mentored a little bit at POV, and they were doing such exciting work. And when it comes to getting filmmakers to actually get a chance to make the work. So you did the CFC, and then also like being a talent to watch recipient is also really beneficial and great because like, and in that way I see progress because Sudz, it sounds like there weren't no, as you said, there were no programs, and now there are so many programs. However, me personally, I've gone through a gajillion of them, and some of my like BIPOC, LD2S, LGBTQIA plus counterparts, like my colleagues, we have program fatigue. um, and so
Right.
I was wondering, I'm sorry, what'd you
No, I
say?
was just saying, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, and kind of, we were talking about this a little bit before we hopped on the Zoom before Suds had joined us, um, about like, I guess my question is kind of like, are these programs created for inclusivity truly beneficial? And they are, but how are they flawed? And like, what could we be working for or toward in the process? Because like, I think even like $125,000, you're not being paid for prep, you're not being paid for a lot of stuff to get your movie off the ground. And then on top of that, you have 25 films flooding the Canadian market that are going to cannibalize each other, which is why they changed it. But I'm a recipient and I'm so happy, so happy. But we have 250 and I cried earlier today. So I'm a crier though, Sudz. Nice to meet you. And so I guess for both of you to both weigh in, because I'm sure Sudz, you get asked to mentor these programs and those kinds of things as well. So with these initiatives, for the both of you, my question to pose to both of you is kind of like, where do you, even though they are beneficial, where do you feel like they can be improved, or when it comes to the process, and like where are they flawed, like in that region, um, if that makes sense. And Tyrone, I'll let you go first if you can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, I guess yeah, we were talking a bit about that before. I mean, I went back to POV in 2019, and you know, it was the first year that the DGC had teamed up with them to do what was called the PA training program. It's still going on. I think they have went through IATSE now as far as getting, and part of the reason I went back and started that program and instructed that program in the first year is because the cause and effect was very grounded and was very practical. It was taking students and teaching them skills, and in return, they would get actual work. They'd get actual access, as Sudz was speaking before. Entering these unions and getting into these guilds is very very hard, right? And a lot of times we see diversity being celebrated in front of the camera, you know, through actors, directors, so forth. But we make up such a small chunk of what actually creates a film and what actually creates a television program. And these programs were very practical in getting people into those spaces because at the end of the day, you know, people have built careers, built homes, have done great things as grips and electrics and art directors and sound engineers and all these positions that we don't really think about or put a lot of stock into. And by virtue of not doing that, then they sort of just become this sort of like whites only space because we don't understand that you can access that and that there's a career there for you and that you can impart parts of your craft or ability into that profession. And then, we're talking about these programs and you have program fatigue, and I'll try to do the shorthand version of it, and I find out a lot of programs are either they try to do training, either a training program or they're artistic incubator, and you really want to be one or the other, but a lot of programs try to do both, and then they end up not doing either one particularly well. And at the end of it, if a training program, if the point is to train you to be, a director per se, or to train you to be a writer, then the result of that should be work as a writer, either getting you into a room or getting you onto a set so that you could actually work. If it's an artist incubator in which we're like, working on artistic development, then it should be like, well, okay, here's some money to go make a short, or here's money to go practice that craft and give us back content, give us back art, right? This is, film is an artistic endeavor, but it's also a craft, and it's also we live in a capitalist society. It's capital, right? And so there's always this sort of, sometimes you get nailed and people say it's true to speak about money, but it really just comes down to money, right? Whether the money is work, whether the money is money to make the film or to make the thing, it really does come down to that. It really comes down to capital, and if that's not what's being exchanged, then you have people coming in and they do the program and then they have to like go fend for themselves on the end, right? And you're sort of like, what was I doing for those 6 months? Like in this program, I could have been, working at wherever and just taking that money, that capital that I would have gotten from construction or whatever, and taking that and then doing the thing, instead, like, what am I doing? And so I feel like for the programs to really work, they have to decide who they are and then back that up with actual capital of like, what is it that we are actually doing with these students when they go through the program? What is the actual result that we're aiming for? Not just something that's sort of this like effervescent sort of, okay, well now you're, in the business, you met a few people, it helps, but
But
Okay.
I think that's all true.
Yeah.
100% facts. You just spit facts there. In addition to that, like the thing is that these organizations are artistic organizations. They write for a grant, and then the grant is the training, and so they got enough money to do the training, but they don't have any money to do anything else. And so what we really need is jobs, and so what we really need for that is shows. And so we need shows on television. We need shows. We need films to go into theaters and go on streaming, and we need to employ these young brothers and sisters to be on these shows. That's how like Jen and I started, was being like writers assistants. Jen was a producer's assistant, and that's how you learn. You learn a lot in television because you got to do it every week, and so you learn like week after week after week how a show is put together. You learn all the the names of all the people, of what a key grip does, what a best boy does, what a gaffer does, all these things. You learn that week in, week out. So getting training ground in television or in animation or wherever it is, that's what we need to do. And so once we get those jobs, then you begin to have a social network, and then those social networks beget the next job and the next job and the next job. So it's about having a driver's license. It's about it's about having like the skills. The truth of it is that even we're producing R.T. Thorne's first feature, right? And so it's like, we had a trainee editor. We can only fund that position for about 12 weeks. And then after that, we couldn't fund that person anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, why, we couldn't get money for the DGC. We couldn't get money out of the budget, any more money out of the budget. But I'm like, we're challenged always, because we always want to have young brothers and sisters like learning, on our shows. Every show we have interns, and also like just try to like bring people up, like, for our DOP on for our one of our camera operators on BLK and Origin Story, Ashley Iris Gill. And so Ashley like was like that was like a level up for her. It was like literally 43 days of being on like being operated. That was the biggest thing she'd ever done. And I tell you, like, she's amazing. She's going to be one of our best DOPs, if not now, or in a few years. She's like there, and that, like, giving her a job or getting her on a job for as long as that was, she did some things that she didn't think she could do, and it's like we need to level up. So it's having those opportunities, creating those opportunities. The program is one thing, but it's actually got to be an opportunity after that. And so those are the things that need to happen. And for that to happen, the industry needs some more money. We need some more capital.
Interesting. Okay. So it sounds like the bottom line, like, I feel like it always ends up being money at the bottom line. And there's a question in the chat that I was going to pitch to both of you, but it sounds like both of you are just kind of talking about it needing to end with money. And I thought recently a friend of mine had told me something in respect to men and women, but I think it's applicable here. They were reading this book. It's like a radical intersectional feminist literature. And there's a statistic saying that a lot of women, when they want to get a job, will go to train for the job and then go do the job, get the job. So pay money to learn how to do it and then do it. And it's a confidence thing, sure, maybe. And then a lot of men will just be like, yeah, I can do it, and then learn on the ground, on the job. And I'm not trying to gender this, or put it in the binary, but it sounds like what you're saying is you can train all day, but like networking is kind of not working. And so the real way to get to it's a network, so getting people into the network by virtue of being employed. And so you're saying that you think the Canadian industry needs more moolah. That's the kind of the parallel we're making. That's interesting. And there's a question in the chat, but I want to segue this conversation about the nature of work into both of what you're respectively kind of issues you face today as filmmakers. Sudz, you're like 25, 40, 50 years into the industry. You're not that old, I know, but like what I'm saying.
God.
Damn.
Wow.
I was gonna say 20. You've been doing it, and then Thyrone, you've been doing it for like, maybe I want to say like 10 to 15, 13 years. You said around that, and that's so like
10, soft 10.
Yeah, soft 10. Okay, so but it's not nothing, and so my question, it kind of leads into this idea of work and like a second feature, because I feel like a lot of times a filmmaker is able to make a first feature and then like they're like, great, I won best international feature at TIFF, or sorry, best feature at TIFF, or like your TIFF top 10, because both of you seem to have achieved that, which is amazing. But I guess, what are the issues that you find that you're facing now as Black filmmakers, if any? Because maybe the world is perfect now, and if they kind of relate to capital, and to bundle into that, there's also the US market, which I think they consider the US market having more audiences available for Black content, for Black filmmakers. So have you ever like kind of been like, maybe I should go see what's going on over there because I'm not popping off, or I don't love what's going on up here? So I'm curious about the nature of work, capital, and like issues that you face as filmmakers with both of you over 10 years of experience in this industry. Thyrone, if you go first.
I guess like one of the things I find that one of the things that our industry is really funny about, like entertainment industry in general, is just this like sort of obsession about virginity sometimes, and everyone's first of something. Everyone's like really excited about someone's first of anything, and then when it comes to doing subsequent things, people are they're a little bit more hesitant. They're like, oh, how did that first one work out? And there's really this big obsession with it. But I think it's kind of sad sometimes that we always come back to the US talk about needing to get down south in order to, or get away in order to expand what it is that we could do as filmmakers. I think that's something that, as a conversation that's happened from the time I've entered the business up until now, and it hasn't really changed, and it feels like the conversation only picks up as time goes on. And it's just crazy to me that we're not spending as much time and as much capital investing in ourselves, in our space, as time has gone on, versus creating this space where everyone has to like constantly feel like they need to like escape and go away. There is something alluring about the US. It has more money.
Mhm.
There is more opportunities, but part of that is culture, right? It's the culture of discovery that exists there, the
Mhm.
culture of this could be something, that
Mhm.
exists there, as opposed to sort of the um, you know, mediocrity or the sort of complacency that exists here. I think we've talked about before, and one of the crazy things about Canada is the absence of culture more so than there being a certain type of culture. And so there's a bit of resistance to any culture actually existing or being created in the space. But I feel like that's
Mhm.
something that we should be pressing more on.
Mhm.
Getting a second feature is pretty difficult for a lot of people. I think they say on average it's 5 years between people's two features. For women, even longer. I think it's about 7 or 8 is what they say,
Ooh,
between two.
damn.
So yeah.
I'm a girl. That sucks. But but I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the offering because it is like when we talk about culture. And Suds, you had kind of said once upon a time, well, not once upon a time because we've only been here for an hour, not even. But you said earlier that you were just excited about making a film about Black people in Toronto. Oh, it was before the chat, that's why. But you had said I was excited about sharing the culture that is Black people falling in love in Toronto. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to if you feel any similarity to what Tyrone has just expressed, or maybe because you're further along in your career, you're experiencing new challenges or challenges, or if the challenges are repeating themselves, like what kind of challenges you're experiencing generally when it comes to you as a filmmaker now.
Well, I think that in terms of like the feature film business has changed, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
as Tyrone was saying, like the average sort of span between first and second feature is like 7 years, and that's like my life because with Home Again was my second feature, and I was like 7 years later. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like it wasn't like you're not sort of sitting on your hands all throughout that. You're working in television, you're working a documentary, you're working, you're doing other things, you're writing all these other things. So it takes a while to get the next thing off the ground, and now I'm writing my next feature. And so it's like I've been very busy writing television and doing a lot of television in the intervening years. But I'm like, you know what? I want to do another feature film, and I have a story that I want to do. So I'm midway through this draft right now. So the issues are, obviously there's always money because you got to pay the bills, and feature films don't pay the bills. It's like a bad habit, you know. But in terms of, and I'm sorry to just sort of bring it around money all the time, but the thing is that
No, it's
it's like
fine.
it's a part of, it's the world, the real world that we're working. But the challenges I think are, like you talked about going down to the States. I don't get, like, I couldn't work on this show if I didn't have representation down in the States. Like, this is an
Interesting.
American show that films in Vancouver. You don't get those jobs in Canada. You get those jobs in LA with LA representation. So, I have LA representation. I got a LA network, and it's like it's these jobs are hard to get, and it takes years to get these jobs, and it takes friendships, and it takes relationships. So you're building your relationships in this world, but you're not building these relationships through just a program. You have to work, and you got to put yourself outside your comfort zone. And so this is something that it's a challenge for every one of us. Like, every one of us, you got to go to Cannes, you got to go to Berlin Alley, you got to go to all these markets. So it's a challenge for every one of us going in a room as a Black person where the Europeans don't even want to talk to you. And that's a
Mhm.
daily challenge that, Jennifer just got back from Berlin, and she got to deal with that. And she's a Black woman, she's going to the thing, and they're all like looking at you like, oh, you're not going to have anything I'm interested in. And then just like sort of turn a blind eye or turn away from you. And it's like, it's not cool. It's not, you don't like going into space like that. But, she's put her time in, and she, it's about relationships and going there like 5 years in a row and building
Mhm.
relationships. And it's something that we have to do because, just like how Moonlight just changed the game, in terms of what we thought a film could do, a Black art film could do in terms of getting people into the cinema. The next piece, the next Tyrone Tommy piece will do the same. It's possible to do the same thing. It's possible to do even
Mhm.
greater, in terms of getting audiences and building audiences for our work. So it's a challenge Absolutely. But we have to put ourselves out there, and we have to write scripts and share our scripts with each other. And so it'll, like, that's one thing I try to do is get others, show my work, and then get other people, and just like, here's, we have a writing circle, and try to like build each
Mm.
other's scripts up. So it's like, it's about making those things bulletproof. It's all of those things. We have to create an artist sort of space, an artistic space, a creative space where we're safe to do that as well. So that's another thing
Mhm.
that we try to do, and that's one of the things. Like, okay, we're producing our T Thorne's first piece, and first feature film, and that'll be ready for the festival this year. So hopefully, it'll all go great and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, we have to take care of each other, and we have to take,
Mm.
artistically, and we have to, you know, go get trained, go take the writing courses, take an acting course if you're a writer, take a directing course if you're an actor. You know what I mean? Like, just take
Yeah.
those courses and just refine the instruments. Go to the monologue slam. There's some great stuff that we have in this city, across the country too. Like, you know, to hone our skills and to just get out into the community. It's really important that we do that, because these barriers that we're talking about, sure, they're there. They're going to be there for a while, but we have to, come at it with some bulletproof stuff that's like better than anything else that's out there.
Culture. It's interesting because Tyrone, you kind of mentioned like the idea of culture and like the fact that sometimes it feels like there's a hesitance to kind of leaning into like spaces that aren't like, I feel like the word I'm thinking of is broad, where it's like not specific, but it also sounds like in some ways, Suds, you're saying like you'd be so great they can't ignore you, where it's like you create a culture within the work that you're making, and eventually people will start looking and being like, what's going on over there? And then eventually everybody's all about it, which is interesting because like when we think about change, a small group of people is really the only way that change has ever really taken place. So thank you both for those offerings. I'd like to segue. So I have a question from the audience, but also I wanted to, this is something I just thought of right now, improv. So for the both of you, if there's a question that Suds you would like to ask of Tyrone, and Tyrone, if there's a question that you'd like to ask of Suds specifically, I'm going to give you a moment to ruminate on that, planting the seed, but you're not in the hot seat. So if you got nothing, you got nothing. So if you want to ask either of each other anything about your experiences, that kind of thing, please, because I'd love to see that. But the question that came into the chat, which I thought was really great, is more so I had a question about content. And so this segues perfectly into it. You both decided to focus on Black men and the role of love in their life. I'd love to hear about why both of you wrote stories that focused on the interior life of Black men through that lens.
No, honestly, that was something that watching your film, Suds, I was tripping on, because you made your film a decade before. It's very Toronto. It's unapologetically Toronto. It's not like trying to hide where it is. And one of the things when I was making Learn to Swim was about showing a Black man in his vulnerability, in his essence, and dealing with Black love, and putting that on screen. And it felt like that in itself was, for us, an act of resistance. And then to watch your film and see you were doing that a decade before, I was just like, it felt very, it was just a trip, like watching it back and seeing that at the same, like, what brought you to that space for yourself when you were doing that? Like, was there other films that people were suggesting, maybe more traumatic or more maybe dramatic films that they thought were like a better representation that you should be going after? Or were you sort of, you always knew you wanted to do that, and that's the story you wanted to tell, that was the vibe you wanted to bring?
Yeah, I think it really was, because there was a lot of market for Black trauma at the time, and still there is, obviously. But I knew that I wanted to make a comedy, and I knew I wanted to make a romantic comedy, and I knew I wanted to go into the interior lives of both Black men and Black women, because I wanted to see, I was young, and like everybody was falling in love, and had relationship issues, and that's what we talked about, right? And so that was like completely completely the vibe, just like with your film. you're young, you're like everybody's falling in love, and you want to show that. You want to show how we yearn for love. We all want love. And I wanted to show that because I wanted that's more common in terms of like our Black reality than if I'm a drug dealer and I gotta kill my friend. I gotta get the package, I gotta get the re-up and do all this stuff. It's a lot more common just trying to fall in love and have a relationship and like just like get with this girl or get with this guy and just to feel like just like love, you know. And it's like you just want at that point in your life, you just want to be with somebody who understands you and who likes you for you and is honest. And when they say they're going to show up, they're going to show up and be there for you.
Yeah.
And show up in certain ways. And like, you know, and so that's what I wanted to portray, just like you know, you wanted to portray this. That's why I like your film so much. It was like, I just saw something natural and beautiful and like, and lovely about it. And also vulnerable. Like I know you're really working on vulnerability, and I was too. I didn't know I was doing that, but at the time I didn't know. Like I wasn't articulating it, but it was like it was definitely I was working towards a vulnerability. And now in my work, I do a lot of male vulnerability. Like that's one of the things I consciously do. I consciously write around that about male vulnerability, especially Black male vulnerability. Because I don't know if you encounter this on sets, but if I deal with like American brother who like literally grew up in like, you know, in the projects, grew up hard, you know, and try to get them to cry, try to get them to be vulnerable is very hard because of the way that they were socialized. Because although even I'm talking about a sensitive actor, it's very hard for them to get to there so quickly. I mean, I can get them there, but it's like it's very hard because of how we're socialized, because of how men are socialized. And then when I'm dealing with women from that same similar backgrounds, it's a little easier, but sometimes depending on how they grew up, it is hard to access those emotions. But again, like we're socialized in this way. But as you said, like those are the things, those are the reasons why we make these films, you know. It's like you literally have so many films in you, only so many films in you, and you just want to touch people and you want to demonstrate to everyone in the world that, hey, you know, this Black man and this Black woman just want to get together and let's throw some obstacles in their way and let's see how they cook. Let's see how they cook. And it's beautiful. I love it. And I continue to do those kind of movies.
I love it, man. It's great. Because even bangers want love too. That's the thing, right? Like even every time you watch these movies, you got these guys hard, and it's like they don't wake up at 7 a.m. hard, you know. Like they're looking for love too, you know. They swipe in, they trying to, you know, they don't show it, you know, up front for everybody, but you know, it's the same story with them as well, you know. So, you know, it connects on many different levels.
Absolutely.
Two bleeding hearts, one zooming. That's the title of this movie, everyone. Well, thank you for sharing that, because like that was one of the parallel why I was excited to have both of you speak to each other, is because of like this whole masculinity and like kind of finding sensitivity within there. And it's hard, especially if you go into a space being othered and having to fight to kind of just be seen as a human, which both of you kind of tried to do. It's just like, we're not doing gangbangers. It's just like people want to love and be loved. And so with this idea of love and vulnerability and kind of what we, I guess in some ways, want to carry on for, like, I hate to be like for our people, but like the narratives that we want to carry on for our people. It just seems very Nelson Mandela of me to be like for our people, but that's why we're here. So carrying this idea forward, what advice, maybe I'm curious, like what advice do you have for filmmakers that are kind of behind you on the journey, that look to both of you in the space as people that have done something really great? And just when it comes to the heart work of this work, so like maybe a piece of like technical advice, but then also a piece of advice so that you stay sane and don't cry at 2:00 in the afternoon because you don't know how you're going to make your movie for $250,000 when you can't get anyone to work for a low amount of money. I'm not speaking for myself. That's oddly specific, but putting it out there. So if you have thoughts, I will be listening, but I think the people in the Zoom, or rather on the YouTube link, would love to hear from you, what we can look to for the future, and what we hope for the future. I'll let Thyrone go first.
Yeah, I mean, like, as far as technical advice goes, I mean, I as much as, I mean, writing is such a lonely sport. It's like one of those, it's like marathon running. You just gotta like show up to every day and do the thing and put in your hours. But I almost would say reading is almost more important. It's just like just reading, just constantly, just read as much as you can, read articles, read other scripts, you know, just spend a lot of time just ingesting the thing that you want to do and give yourself time for that, you know. And then as far as a more personal thing is, you know, advice is always autobiographical, so I need to take this as well, but also just take care of yourself, give yourself grace, you know. We're not going to figure out everything today, we're not going to figure it all out next year, you know. We're on a long journey, in both in this business and both as people, you know. And so, you know, take care of yourself, you know, get that massage, you know, take that afternoon off and go to the park and get those $3 tacos and sit down and just and to take it in, you know, just like give yourself that grace, because I feel like the burnout in this industry, especially for us, could be real and it could come hard, you know, and it comes sometimes when you least expect it. So just give yourself that time, give yourself that grace and that moment for yourself whenever you can, you know. It doesn't always have to be, I know everyone's on Instagram, you've seen the hustler posts, you know, the Grant Cardone posts or whatever people are watching, but like, you know, you don't need to grind yourself into the ground like that, you know, like take care of yourself.
And you said where we can look to for the future and any advice that you have for the filmmakers of tomorrow.
I would say read one script a week. There's all kinds of scripts. Like read like you've got like the WGA nominated scripts, Writers Guild nominated scripts, and you know, Oscar nominated scripts, Blacklist. Read one script a week. And I would say reverse engineer great scripts that you love as to why they're great for you, and how they work. That's the way that every writer who I researched, that's how they learn. And you learn by reverse taking stuff apart. That this is how you learn. Share your work with others. Give yourself some deadlines if you are writing. You know, give yourself, okay, after this month, I'm going to have like 5 pages, you know, or I'm going to have like half the treatment done, or I'm going to give myself you know, I'm going to need a one sheet. I need a one sheet. So at the end of this week, or the end of these 2 weeks, I'm gonna have one sheet and I'm gonna send it over to this person and tell somebody, say, I'm gonna send you this in 2 weeks. So you're gonna read it. And like a person who got like a job, who knows this stuff a little bit. So just, you know, just give yourself a deadline, you know, and put some pressure on yourself. You know, obviously don't like, you know, oh my God, I you know, I didn't make the deadline or whatever, but challenge yourself. Take a course in writing. Like I learned, I took a course in writing at George Brown College. And that was it was like a second act workshop, and it was for a feature film. And I told her I didn't have a feature film in me at the time. I had a half-hour short in me. And she's like, I don't know. And then I begged her to let me in the course. And then so I did it. It was 12 weeks, and I got the short done. And that short went on to win like the HBO Short Film Award, first only non-Americans to ever win that prize. And so it's like but it's like I begged her to get in the course. I begged the professor to get in the course, and she reluctantly let me in. And now, you know, she talks about this is the guy who did this and went on to do all the stuff. But you take that course. Don't be afraid of taking a course. Don't be afraid.
And so then I guess the last thing to wrap up, Thyrone kind of spoke to the idea of like taking care of yourself. I recently did a panel where like I had to learn that the hard way because I was burnt out last summer. And it's just like nobody is going to, especially when you're a person of color and like maybe you don't have access to endless resources. Like, no, sometimes you got to be in the words of Beyonce, you have to be your own best friend. You know that song, me, myself, and that, like that vibe. Anyway, so having said that, to close off, when it comes to, that's the technical side of things, like not being afraid and like read, learn, be hungry to learn. When it comes to how you've managed to continue to have a sustainable career with children, I'm sure it has been tough. So how do you keep your mind right, or like advice to keep your mind right for Black filmmakers that cry at 2:00 in the afternoon because they don't know what they're going to do about their movie? Oh, I said that already, but you get what I'm saying. So like the idea being, any advice you have to keep our mind right, to keep your heart okay, that kind of thing.
I think you got to be in community. Like, I think that part of it is like, you ain't out here doing this all by yourself. And that's why I always tell like film students who are mentoring is like, make sure you get to know everybody in your path and in your cohort, because those are the same people you're going to see for the rest of your career. So you ain't out here alone. And so just try to get out here and network, try to like, volunteer on other people's shorts, volunteer, on other people's stuff. And then they'll also volunteer on your thing, but you're in community here, and just be a part of building community. The Black Screen Office has stuff, but I think that we have to, network, in our community, but also support, go to Real Asian, go to, it's like, you need to go and be a part of this community that we're all a part of. And so I think that's a part of it, to understand that we're not alone. I got to get back to work because I got to go. We got a scheduling meeting, but thank you very much for having me, Aisha, Tanya, everybody at Real World. I just got to go to this scheduling meeting because we start.
Yeah, it's 4:00. It's 5:00. Go. Yes, you're in the middle of your workday. Thank you so much for being here. Ta-ta.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sudz.
All right. Take care, Tara.